I don't think that Johnson fundamentally believed in his own lockdown. So therefore, when it's suggested to him or told to him that he has broken the rules and others have broken the rules, you get all the usual stuff about, well, there weren't any parties, or there were parties, but we didn't break the rules and the rules were fine, and all this nonsense.
Boris Johnson might have wanted to be back leading the news, but surely not for yet more allegations of COVID rule breaking. In a moment, we'll speak to Will Walden, his former communications chief. But first, let's speak to Lara Spirit, the Times Red Box reporter who's been following the story right back to COVID times. Morning, Lara.
Morning, Esma.
So just explain how this has all come to light. I mean, this is a ministerial diary that someone's had a look at in the course of preparing for the public inquiry. Just take us through what's happened.
Yes, so Boris Johnson handed his diary to the lawyers who are helping him with his defence for that public inquiry into COVID that we've known about for some time now. In the process of looking at this ministerial diary, and during those preparations, during the kind of disclosure review, they thought that this ministerial diary had revealed visits from friends in lockdown, and they thought that it was not the case that the Cabinet Office would be prepared to hand this over to ministers without the police having a look at it, and that in the sequence of these events, the appropriate thing to do when they found what they believed was details of lockdown breaking was to hand it over to the Metropolitan and Thames Valley Police, which is indeed what they've done, and that is why we learned yesterday from the Times, of course, that Boris has been referred to the police.
And so, what do we know about the particular gathering? Friends, family? There were some allegations about a baby shower for Carrie Johnson at the time. Do we know what this might have been?
So we don't know exactly what the details of this are. We know as of January last year, so from a pretty long time ago, the Downing Street had admitted, when I've been reporting on this story, that Boris Johnson and his wife had been commuting from Chequers between the 20th and 26th of March. Now, on the 23rd of March, Boris Johnson gave that infamous instruction to the British people, you must stay at home. But their defence at the time was that on the 26th of March, lockdown legally came into effect. But what we know from the Cabinet Office is that the details that have been passed over to the police are relevant from June 2020 to May 2021, so a later period of that. Now, obviously, we've heard a lot about Boris's defence this morning, but his allies have really come out kicking and have said that even have gone as far to say they're seriously considering a legal action against the Cabinet Office because they believe that these revelations are so defamatory and they want to contest them with all their might. But I think knowing as we do that there's been deep concern about these possible events and visits over such a long period of time, I think, given that we're about to hear from the Privileges Committee next month into whether or not he'll be suspended, and if so, for how long, I think it's a very important revelation that we've learned yesterday.
Will these revelations delay that Privileges Committee investigation?
It's very unlikely, I think, that we'll see a significant delay as a result of this investigation. So they were made aware of this slightly earlier, we think towards the back end of last week, and it would be surprising, given that this has been such a long-running investigation, that this would delay that. Now, whether or not they have full access to the ministerial diaries themselves and precisely what materials the Privileges Committee will have access to as a result of this, I think we're waiting to see. But I think you'd be unlikely to see a significant delay in this, because the kind of timeline on Boris Johnson's future has been pretty well worn for some time, and indeed we're waiting for his resignation honours list. That's supposed to come off the Privileges Committee as well. So I think there's a lot that people would like to get on with, and with regard to the Privileges Committee itself, I think we've long been expecting that the next month we should be hearing from them finally.
Okay. Lara, thank you. Lara Spirit, she is a Times Red Box reporter.
Will Walden was Boris Johnson's communications director. He's now with Edelman. Joins us now. Morning, Will.
Morning, Stig.
What do you make of them? What will Boris Johnson make of these things? Because I hear his allies are saying they want to sue the Cabinet Office, but it feels difficult to sue the Cabinet Office, who are paying for your lawyers, who've looked at this and passed this to civil servants, who've passed it to the police. I'm not sure that sounds very actionable. Is that a sign that he's bothered by this, do you think?
Yeah, I just think he's extremely bothered by it. And I mean, you just couldn't make it up. His own lawyers, in trying to defend him, have uncovered something which actually could prove a real problem. I think the first thing to say is that it is simply too early to say what's happened here with any definitive detail. There isn't enough detail, and I doubt as it stands this has changed anybody's mind. You know, if you disliked Boris, it'll be yet more evidence that you were right to. If you're a fan, it's yet more evidence that the blob is out to get him some way. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're probably thinking like I'm thinking, oh gosh, here we go again. And I suspect much of the country has moved on. But I think the problem for Boris this morning is that there's often no smoke without fire with him. And this is undoubtedly an issue, and the timing couldn't be worse. The Privileges Committee report is looming. I also think it's really bad news for the current Prime Minister, because it simply reminds people of the bad old days that Sunak wants to leave behind. I also don't think, and your correspondent referred to it, I don't think it helps for Boris and his allies to be protesting quite so vociferously. Yeah. Dismissing this as a politically motivated plot led by those who don't like Brexit, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said yesterday, I think that starts to look a bit weak. We're told no ministers were involved in the referral, and they say they had no prior notice of this. Johnson's people at the Cabinet Office say that's simply not true. But I think the biggest problem here, Stig, this morning, is that this supposedly involves friends and family. And over the original parties in number 10, Boris could have said, which he did, you know, it was my workplace, I didn't know about it. Some people think that's stretching credulity. It's a weak argument, but it's just about believable. I think the problem here is he now can't say if friends and family visited him at his grace and favour country home when everyone else was abiding by the rules. I think that is a real problem for him. And it's interesting that they've complained so vociferously, but they haven't put the record straight. They haven't denied that these things happened, and they haven't come out with a timeline that said, look, it's okay. And I think that might be the problem for Boris.
It also points to a pathology of Boris Johnson, that these things were being done in plain sight. That's what winds some people up. That no one's been snooping with a camera at the corner of Chequers and identifying this. This would have been in their diary. The diary, meeting with whatever the diary says, it was clearly sufficiently straightforward to be passed on. And that's the thing that's been a feature of all of this with number 10 as well. It's the fact that it was kind of done in plain sight, because ultimately an allegation would be they didn't feel that the rules really applied to them in the way that it applied to everyone else. And that's the thing that winds people up sometimes.
Yeah, I think that absolutely winds people up, but I think it's also the core of the matter that, you know, I've said before, I don't think that Johnson fundamentally believed in his own lockdown. So therefore, when it's suggested to him or told to him that he has broken the rules and others have broken the rules, you get all the usual stuff about, well, you know, there weren't any parties, or there were parties, but we didn't break the rules and the rules were fine, and all this nonsense. And it behoves itself. And that's the problem that he's got. He never quite believed in it. So that's why, although he protests so vociferously this morning, it's quite easy to believe the possibility that these things did happen. Yeah. And you know, he's now got lawyers involved to say, well, they didn't happen in the way that it's being suggested, and it was all okay, and it was within the rules. And the problem for Boris and his allies is we've been here before, and we're here again. You know, at a time when, you know, when this story broke last night, I mean, I couldn't quite believe it. My wife said to me, you know, God, here we go again. I suppose we're doing a media round this morning. But the truth is, Boris Johnson is currently in America doing good work, you know, on behalf of the British government, in the sense of supporting Ukraine. He's talking to lawmakers in the Republican Party about how they need to continue to support the war in Ukraine. That's excellent work, and it's the work that he should be doing and he should be known for. The problem is that this overshadows absolutely everything that he's doing, and it will continue to do so. And the way to set the record straight will be to simply say, these are the events in question, these were the rules at the time, I did not break the rules. But as ever with Boris, it's more opaque, and that's why it's a problem.
Just finally, before you go, hey, let me put another theory to you, though. In the same manner that Donald Trump benefits from being prosecuted, and that might actually get him the Republican nomination, Boris Johnson benefits from being at the centre of this type of conspiracy thing, because enough people in his base, enough people in the Tory party think, yeah, they're out to get him. That means I want to support him more. This is good news for Boris Johnson's future Tory prospects.
No, I don't think it's good news at all, Stig. I think it's actually the opposite. It's very different to Trump. I think Boris's support was always a mile wide and an inch deep, and that's the problem. And it's an increasingly small but vociferous band of supporters that protest about this thing. I think it's very different to Trump. I think it leaves Boris in a difficult position. Look, if his people are able to do what I just said and clear his name quickly, and the police drop any investigations into him, there's nothing to see here. They'll all go, "Told you it was a conspiracy." There you go. I was proven right. But if it drags on and it's any more than that, I think it hurts Boris Johnson's chances of a political return, which are small anyway, even more. And if there is proven wrongdoing around friends and family, I think we can confidently say goodbye to Boris Johnson.
I think it's a fair analysis. We'll see what people think of that. Will, great to speak to you as ever. That's Will Walden, their senior counsel at the PR firm Edelman, Boris Johnson's former communications director.